morning, everybody. Welcome to the greenhouse. This morning we're going to talk about some real special aspects about the plants we love so much, the succulents. And as I talk about them, you're going to get to hear the secrets that make these plants survive in places where nothing else can survive. You're going to also get to hear on the methods they use, why they're succulent, and how they have adapted in places all over the world. A succulent, of course, and most of you know this, is a plant that stores water. Where most of these plants are found in the field, they tend to live where there is limited rainfall or limited moisture only certain portions of the year. Other plants can't make it in this environment. Therefore, the succulent has learned to store his water, which allows the succulent plant to make it through these drought periods. But there's a magical aspect to storing that water that makes the succulent plant different than all other plants. The magical aspect is kind of a special one, and it's called CAM, Crassulacean acid metabolism. It refers to how these plants metabolize differently than all other plants. All plants, for the most part, minus succulents, metabolize during the day. Everybody here is familiar with the term photosynthesis, the sun, the plants absorbing carbon dioxide, giving off oxygen, going through the photosynthesis process. Well, our succulent plants are metabolizers in the night. And they metabolize in the night for a reason. But how do they do that since there's no sun at night for the photosynthesis process? Well, here's what happens. These succulent plants, they absorb the sun in the photosynthesis process during the day, but they don't put it into a metabolic process. They store it, and then they can use it at night. Why do they want to metabolize at night? Well, what happens is they absorb that sun and store it as an acid. What they choose to do, usually about dark, they tend to take that acid and they put it into play. And then what you see happening is it's giving off its oxygen, taking in its carbon dioxide. People are going, well, why does that need to be at night? It needs to be at night for the following reason. They're going to each choose to give off that carbon or that oxygen and take in the carbon dioxide. When they give off the oxygen, this is from their cellular structure, and they are giving off a portion of their own moisture, their own succulents. If it's very, very dry at night, they may give off more moisture than they might absorb when they take in the carbon dioxide. So basically what happens, these plants have learned not to open the pores, the stomata, during the day when it's generally hot and dry, but to open them at nighttime. And at nighttime, this is when we find that there's generally moisture, condensation created, the temperatures generally drop, and it's much more beneficial to the plant because the plant isn't going to lose a whole bunch of moisture when it's metabolizing, but it might actually gain moisture. There's been some amazing studies done. Rudolf Schultz did a great one with the genus Copiopoa, and he showed that plants in higher humid atmospheres will gain more moisture than plants in low humid atmospheres. Well, that makes sense, except you'd think, well, most of the moisture comes up through the roots. That's not always the case with some of these plants. Sometimes the moisture is more absorbed foliar through the stoma than it is from the roots. So here's kind of a magic situation, and I call it the secret to succulent plants, is that they metabolize at night. Other plants don't do it because they don't need to. But I want you to notice, and this is important, when I look at these little plants up front here, these are an Haworthia, and they're a variegated Haworthia, meaning that they are lacking chlorophyll in a certain part of their body. Well, you know chlorophyll is important to the photosynthesis process, but they have some chlorophyll, so they can still store their chlorophyll in an acid form and then metabolize at night. You might notice these succulent cacti right here. Notice the different color of body. And it's because they grow in a slightly different environment, a different amount of sun exposure than you might see for these. These are generally in the shade. And then you can look at these real white spined ones here in front of me. These are magnificent mammillarias that come from the Sierra Madre Occidental, and they grow where the solar intensity is so incredibly bright that they have to be very, very screened. So their spines are produced white, and underneath you'll see wool, and that white and wool helps shade net the actual plant. Now here's an exciting one back here called Pachypodiumbrevicali, and it's a really amazing plant. It grows to look a lot like a big rock, but the caudex, or the trunk of the plant, is flat, and this is where you have your leaves and the body both being able to do their metabolic process at the same time. When the leaves are on, there's a lot of metabolism taking place with the leaves. These come from Madagascar, and being in Madagascar, you know, during their summer months, monsoonal seasons, they get a lot of moisture. So they absorb this moisture, especially at night when there's a temperature differentiation. And think about a glass of water, ice cold glass of water on a table on a hot day. It condenses on the outside. And you take these plants, the nighttime temperature drops, that's cold, and the warm temperature of the soil, the earth, and the plants attached to it stays warmer. So condensation occurs, and they get moisture from the air as well as condensation. Amazing how these plants tend to survive and make it. Now here's the key thing with Crassulacean acid metabolism. You've noticed different plants, different characteristics, different environments. They all have to have that temperature drop at night to do their best. For example, where I live here, I'm at 7,000 feet, and effectively we'll have nighttime temperatures in the summer that'll go down to 60, 65, 50, somewhere in there, and daytime temperatures maybe as high as 95. Well, in the daytime, the plants all shut down the metabolism, and what they do is they absorb the heat, they absorb the sun and store it as an acid, and they like that warmth to grow in. But nighttime drops, and now you've got the moisture coming up from the soil, and these plants are absorbing it at night, all through the night. A lot of people ask, well, why is this so important to succulents? And I try to tell them, I've learned, and it was only by accident, I was a teacher for 30-some years, and that means I got up very early, I taught early classes, and then I would finish in the late afternoon. Well, I couldn't water my plants until late afternoon or early evening. Well, I didn't know it, but I was doing the right thing because I was putting moisture in the soil, making it available, so when the CAM process started, as the sun went down, the moisture was there. I lived in the Mojave, the high desert, and it's dry as a bone. So this was perfect for my plants, but I didn't know it. I found out over years of study and experimentation that that's what most of us should probably do. Aside from that, when you look at all of this and you look at what I call the secret to succulents, it has everything to do with their metabolizing at night and learning for us to do what happens in nature. When you water your plants at the right time, the right amount, they will do wonderfully. Here's another factor though. Don't forget, I said earlier that a lot of these plants, they have a dormant time, and that dormant time is generally what we call their non-growth cycle. It's winter for most plants, but some plants it can be summer. And as a result, when these plants are dormant, they still have to go through the metabolic process, just a lot less. And during those dry times, that's where it's extremely critical because they can't afford to lose more moisture than they can gain. They can maintain, but anything that's a minus or a negative is very bad for the plant in the long run. So keep that in mind when you deal with your plants. You need to learn, and we'll talk about this in a later session, what's a summer grower, what's a winter grower, what's a dormant period, what's a growth period. It's different for each species. Most are summer growers because that's when monsoons happen in most of these dry, arid parts of the world. So bottom line, wrapping it up, we really want to promote the proper growth and understanding on how to grow these plants. So we're bringing to you today this first session, what I call the secret to succulents, CAM, Crassulacean acid metabolism. But you know, from the time I was a little boy, I loved cacti and succulents because they were sort of the underdogs. People didn't like them then. And just like that, I found out where I found most cacti and succulents, I found these fantastic lizards, once again, the underdog. But here's an example of a beautiful blue-tongued skink from Australia. And as you know, there are some wonderful succulents to be found in Australia. Hopefully you've enjoyed this and I've made my message clear to all of you. Took me 51 years to kind of learn this, but I've learned it, I think. But there's always a new question on the horizon. Thank you, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed.